Right now, in the middle of the South China Sea, Beijing is doing something that looks physically impossible. They are dredging millions of tons of sand to build unsinkable, concrete aircraft carriers on top of fragile coral reefs. The West calls it an illegal land grab, but to the strategists in Beijing, this isn't aggression, it is survival. It is a desperate, multi-billion-dollar attempt to stop a ghost from 1841. That year, a single British iron ship called the Nemesis, known as the Devil Ship, shattered the Chinese Navy in an afternoon and kicked off the Century of Humiliation. It proved one terrifying fact that haunts China to this day. If you cannot control the coast, you will be destroyed on land. Here is how a 19th century nightmare is forcing China to turn the ocean into a fortress. The Great Wall of Sand didn't happen over decades. It happened almost overnight. For most of human history, if you wanted an island, you had to wait for a volcano to erupt or for coral to grow over millions of years. But in 2013, China decided they couldn't wait that long. They needed a shield now. So they deployed a fleet of massive, specialized ships known as trailing suction hopper dredgers. The most famous one is the Tianjin, nicknamed the Magic Island Maker. This isn't just a ship, it is a floating factory of destruction. It lowers a massive cutter head to the ocean floor, grinds up the living coral reef into dust, sucks it up, and then sprays a slurry of sand and rock hundreds of feet into the air. Day and night for months, these ships pumped millions of tons of sand onto submerged rocks that had never broken the surface of the water before. The speed was terrifying. In just 18 months, China created roughly 3,200 acres of new land. To put that in perspective, all other claimants in the region, Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, had created about 100 acres combined over 40 years. China did 30 times that amount in less than 2 years. But they didn't just pile up sand, they hardened it. Almost immediately, the satellite images started showing concrete, then runways, then radar domes. Take Fiery Cross Reef. In 2014, it was just a jagged rock that barely poked out of the water at high tide. Today, it is a fully militarized fortress with a 3,000-meter runway. That length is not accidental. A 3,000-meter runway isn't for fighter jets or supply planes. It is long enough to land an H-6K strategic bomber, a plane capable of carrying nuclear-tipped cruise missiles. They built huge hangars, reinforced to withstand airstrikes. They installed high-frequency radar arrays that can see over the horizon. They deployed surface-to-air missile batteries that can shoot down incoming threats from hundreds of miles away. The West calls these artificial islands, but militarily, that is the wrong word. An island is a piece of geography. These are unsinkable aircraft carriers. Think about it. A real aircraft carrier costs $13 billion. It can be sunk by a single torpedo. It needs to be refueled. It needs to return to port for repairs. But an island? You cannot sink an island. You cannot disable its engines because it doesn't have any. It sits there, permanently, projecting power 500 miles in every direction. By building 3 of these major bases, Fiery Cross, Subi, and Mischief Reef, China has created a strategic triangle that effectively locks down the heart of the South China Sea. They have turned international waters into a Chinese lake. But building the islands was just the construction phase. The real strategy is how they use them to push the United States Navy away. It is a tactic known as the cabbage strategy, wrapping the islands in layer after layer of defense so you can never get to the core. And this is where the real danger begins, because now the US Navy isn't just sailing through open water anymore. They are sailing into a trap.
This is the phase military experts call the cabbage strategy. If you look at a cabbage, it has layers. To get to the heart, you have to peel them back one by one. China has wrapped these islands in layers of defense so dense that it makes it impossible for the US Navy to get close without risking a full-scale war. The outer layer isn't the Navy. It is the maritime militia, thousands of fishing boats that look civilian but are actually paid, fueled, and commanded by the military. They swarm around the islands like a moving wall. If a US destroyer tries to sail through, they don't see a warship. They see hundreds of innocent fishing boats blocking their path. If the Americans fire on them, they are shooting civilians and starting World War III. If they turn back, they lose control of the sea. It is the ultimate gray zone tactic. The next layer is the Coast Guard, but these aren't small patrol boats. China has built the largest Coast Guard cutters in history, ships like the Zatu class, which are actually significantly bigger than a US Arleigh Burke class destroyer. They are white hulls with massive water cannons, designed to ram and bully foreign ships without technically firing a shot. And finally, hiding behind those layers are the missile batteries on the islands themselves. This creates what the Pentagon calls an anti-access area denial zone, or A2AD.
The goal isn't to fight the US Navy in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
The goal is to make the cost of entering the South China Sea so high that the Americans just stay away. Right now, the U.S. Navy still sails through. They conduct freedom of navigation operations, sailing destroyers within 12 miles of these artificial islands, just to prove that we can. They are trying to show that international law still matters. But every time they do, they are shadowed by Chinese warships and swarmed by the militia. The radio warnings are constant. The risk of a collision is extreme. It is a high-stakes game of chicken played with nuclear-armed superpowers. And this brings us back to the ghost of 1841. When the HMS Nemesis destroyed the Chinese fleet, it did so because the Qing dynasty had no eyes on the ocean and no reach beyond their own shore. They waited for the enemy to come to them, and by then, it was too late. The Great Wall of Sand is the direct answer to that mistake. China has pushed its defensive perimeter 1,000 miles away from the mainland. They have turned the South China Sea into a buffer zone, a kill box where their land-based missiles can target any ship that enters. They are telling the world that the Century of Humiliation is over. In 1841, a single British ship could sail up the Yangtze River and bring an empire to its knees because the front door was left open. Today, with 7 unsinkable aircraft carriers and a wall of missiles, Beijing has made one thing perfectly clear to the West. The gate is closed.